Does this Stars defensive group have what it takes to reach the ultimate goal? And why is it essential they take pressure off their netminders, specifically Otter? That's next on Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Joey Erickson, former producer of 105.3 The Fan and the play-by-play voice of the Chippewa Steel. It's a pleasure to be with you. Make sure you go ahead and hit subscribe. That way you never miss an episode of Locked On Stars. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. I know the Stars did a big preseason win yesterday against the Arizona Coyotes. And of course, you never want to take too much out of a preseason game, but a 7-0 dominating win is never a bad thing. That's for sure. Logan Stankoven scored a goal. Thomas Harley did. It looked like quite a bit of guys chipped in. And unfortunately, you could not watch it. I really could not find it anywhere unless you were at the HEB Center. But it seemed like a wonderful game and a contest that the Stars pretty much dominated in all three periods. So good news there as Texas hockey is officially back, baby. So I wanted to go ahead and finish up the previews of the defensive pairings and maybe some of the others that may be in and out of the lineup throughout the season. Go over some of Pete Deboer's kind of defensive system, what the official pairings we think are going to look like on opening nights, and kind of dive into that and wrap up our previews here for the 2023-24 season. Hope you had a wonderful weekend. It was a long one, but I'm doing all right. That's for sure. Excited to be back for another week of Locked On Stars. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. The last two guys I wanted to touch on was Jani Hakanpaa and Nils Lundkvist. We may have to nudge some people back because it's a jam-packed episode today. I'm going to try to get into it all, so we might have to rearrange some things, but we're going to do our best. Let's start with Hakanpaa. So 31 years old. He had 16 points, which was a career high last season. He played in all 82, and he's entering the final year of his contract. So it's a big year for Hakanpaa, to say the least, because, you know, I don't know if this is going to be a guy that's going to be around for next year, just with the depth they kind of have in the AHL and some guys that they probably want to look at in free agency and, you know, who knows, even at the deadline coming up, because we've seen it in recent years. If this team has a chance, general manager Jim Neal is going to make a move. And last year, they went with Domi and Dadonov. They did not touch up the defensive group. And maybe this year, that's what Jim Neal wants to go to. So we'll see. My thoughts on Hakanpaa. I love his size, of course. I think that's essential, and you need a little bit of that because I think the Stars probably don't feature enough size than other defensive groups in the NHL. And I think you need some of those big guys that can muck it up in the corners and get into battles. And I know Hakanpaa is not your fleet-footed defenseman and the ability to move the puck and skate effortlessly. That's just not his game. But I think he's an okay penalty killer. I don't think he's great, but he provides some size. He can block shots when need to be. And I think with them now finally eliminating this Hakanpaa and Lindell pairing, he may be featured in a better light with a more mobile guy like Thomas Harley, which we're expecting here to be his partner on opening night, or at least for the upcoming year. And, you know, going back and rewatching some of the playoff games and just taking a look at some of the challenges that the Stars were having, they got torched off the rush, especially against the Kraken in Vegas, who of course have so much speed and can, make plays on the run. And they got in, and especially that Hakanpaa and Lindell group really struggled off the rush, where they would get beat wide, or there'd be a man that's unmarked, and then they get a grade A chance on Ottinger. And some of that's not always on them. Look, the forwards have a big responsibility in the defensive zone. Sometimes that can be a problem way up the ice, where you're turning the puck over the opposing blue line, and then you got numbers coming the other way for the opposing team. But that was something they really, really struggled with, and I think will be somewhat more eliminated by putting Hakanpaa and Lindell with the more mobile defensemen like your Thomas Harley or Nils Lundkvist. So, but I think he's essential to have, just because he does provide that size element, and the Stars don't really have that. And he's physical, and I think he can cause a lot of issues for the opposition. And I'm excited to see what he looks like with a guy like Harley, because we really have not seen him with someone of Harley's skill or potential since he's been with the Stars, right? The last few seasons, he's pretty much been paired with Lundell, night in and night out. So I think that'll do him some good. And I would expect him to have a pretty nice season. I think with playing with Harley as well, you'll probably see a tick up in the offensive production. But more importantly, for a guy like him, it's all about breakouts and getting out of your own zone. He is one of the few righties on this team too, which makes him very important, because you want to try to pair him with a guy like Harley, which is probably perfect because he's lefty. So it allows Harley to play on his right side. And that's one of the issues we've seen with Miro and Ryan Suter a little bit. Of course, Miro is just so world class. It really doesn't matter what side he plays on. But if Pete Deboer had his way, he would like to have Miro on his right side, right on the left side. And we saw that, I believe, at the beginning of last year, where they tried him with Miller a few times. It really never worked out. But having guys like Hakanpaa and Lundkvist that are both righties, you can pair them with that left-handed defenseman, which they are littered with throughout this group. And, that's important for breakouts. You're not on your backhand as much when you're in your own zone. And it will lead to, better outlet passes and less 50-50 battles and certain things like that, which is important because it's all about puck possession. And kind of this Pete Deboer system, which we'll touch on at the end of today's episode as well. So Nils Lundkvist, he had 16 points in 60 games last season, as we kind of segue into Nils. And I really like him. I really do. I think he's shown a lot of potential, and he showed those flashes right last year where, that was a very nice play. He has the offensive upside. And I know Pete Deboer touched on it at the beginning of training camp that guys with a more offensive mentality take a little bit longer to understand how to play defense in the NHL. Miro had a little bit of that. Thomas Harley especially needed a little bit of guiding into the league, right? Because Harley was the person too that thought he was ready to play in the NHL last year, maybe even the year prior, but they let him develop in the NHL or the AHL, excuse me, and then he comes back and you're like, whoa, this is a completely different player. And, Niels touched on it too, where he needed to be stronger and try to find more consistency. That was kind of the theme of his little spiel to the media before training camp was about finding more consistency. That way he can contribute on an everyday basis if he gets that opportunity, which it looks like the coaching staff is going to give him that opportunity. His leash was a bit tight last year. But if you're Pete Deboer, you had a lot of veterans. You had a guy like Hanley in the rafters most nights that, 30 years old, but he was able to get the job done when he came into the lineup. And let's face it, coaching staffs are usually going to show more grace to a veteran than Nils Lundkvist. And I understand as a fan too, it's frustrating because look, we gave up a first-round pick for this guy, and Jim Neal does not do that all the time, to say the least. And he gave up a first-round pick. He wanted to play and have an impact, especially when you're looking at other guys that weren't having much success. But He's still so young. He hasn't even played a full season worth of games here at the NHL level. He's just gotten a taste of it. And I think if we give him some time, he's going to turn out to be a wonderful, wonderful player for the Dallas Stars. And it looks like he came back stronger. That's kind of the news. And he talked about how he wanted to work on being more conditioned, more fresh. That way he can contribute with more consistency. And if we get that, I think that's going to be huge to this group. That's just another piece to the puzzle. And it looks like Pete Deboer's not worried about it. He's mentioned it multiple times. He's not worried about it. And, I think as a fan base, we have been, just because we want guys like him to play, because he does bring that element that certain guys like Hakanpaa and Lindell don't have. And that's just very, very exhilarating for us to watch and have another piece like a Harley. I don't think he has the offensive potential of a Thomas Harley and not a Miro Heiskanen, but you'll take it where you can get it on this back end. And especially with Pete Deboer, he wants his offense and his defensive pairings to be up and join the rush, be a part of the offense. That's usually kind of a staple and a characteristic of his offense is defensemen score a lot of points. They get a lot of opportunities. And I think Nils could be a great addition to that. Alrighty, that'll wrap up some of your last season previews with Hakanpaa and Lundkvist. We'll do a little bit more here coming up in just a moment. We'll do Joel Hanley and some of the odd man out situations and who may be rotating in and out of the lineup depending on scratches and injuries and certain things like that. So up next, we'll touch on that some more. Joel Hanley and maybe even some of the others that may be starting in the AHL or be kind of bouncing up and down. And we'll do that in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by Jase Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase Case. The Jase Case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy, medication delivery, and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Get the Jase Case. You can get $20 off on life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code Locked On. You can go to checkout on jasemedical.com. Use the code Locked On for $20 off. That is JASE Medical.com. All righty, time to really wrap up some previews on your defensive group for this 2023-24 season. Always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for so much of the love, the support that you have given me. I love reading your comments on YouTube and getting to interact with y'all. Let's continue to build this community. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button, put the notifications on, never miss an episode of Locked On Stars. We are close to 2,000 subscribers. Can you believe that? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Let's continue to grow and have some fun along the way. Also, some fun news. A crossover episode coming up with myself and Locked On Wild. So Seth Topol reached out to me and he was like, hey, we should do one. You're new. And we have somewhat of a connection. So I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but I went to school at St. Cloud State University, so big hockey school up in Minnesota. He did as well. So we have a little bit of that connection, big Huskies. So we figured no better time, especially with the Stars and Wild and how much attention that those two teams have gotten over the past few seasons. So, hey, we have the advantage. Not a big deal. So Texas hockey, baby. All righty. So yeah, make sure to keep an eye out for that for tomorrow. Very, very excited to do that. And we'll preview a little bit more about the Stars and the Wild, and we'll see how the Central Division shakes up just a touch. Okay. I wanted to touch a little bit on Joel Hanley. I think he deserves it, the 32-year-old, because he had a phenomenal playoff run last year. Joel Hanley is a guy that he's never going to jump off the television to you, but he probably had the toughest job on this team last year, where he was sitting for 8 to 10 games not a season, 8 to 10 games a night, I should say, or in a row. And then he had to jump in and have to play a game and adjust to the speed. And, you can practice all you want, but it's very different to that game speed, right? And, he would jump right in there and he just never missed a beat. And you got to respect guys like that who got the job done. And the next thing you know, he became kind of the safety valve for Thomas Harley. That was a pair that was featured quite a bit throughout the playoffs last season. And with Connor Miller not, I guess, rising to expectations like the staff was hoping, Hanley had to, kind of fill a void and play with Harley. And I think he was great. He only had 2 points in the 26 games. You have him on contract for the next 2 years. Look, he's cheap. He's available. And he's kind of that like zero-sum player, right? He's not always going to score you a bunch of goals, a bunch of offensive outbursts, but he's not going to give up a lot either. And that was what was so, I guess, perfect about him and Harley was they weren't giving up much, which you couldn't say for other groups. Hakanpaa, Lundell, cough, cough. And, and they played very solid together. And who knows with how the season's going to shape up too, right? Like we have this idea of who the pairings are going to be, but look, this is the National Hockey League. There's going to be injuries. There's ebbs and flows of people's play. Who knows what some guys are going to look like this season? Maybe Hanley and Harley reconnect, and then Hanley's kind of your everyday defenseman. Right now, it looks like he's going to be the odd man out. They have a lot of depth. They went out and they signed some guys like Gavin Bayreuther, who was, of course, in the Stars system for a while. He went and played a year with Columbus. He is back, and he could be a guy that's kind of jumping up and down between the AHL. Jordy Ben signed a 1-year deal. Big assist yesterday in the playoff game, or not the playoff game, the preseason game. If I have to say Jordy Ben, a big assist in a playoff game, things may have gone horrendously bad and the Stars defense. No offense to him. Okay. I love Jordy and I love the Ben and Ben connection, but we can be somewhat honest about that. You have Alexander Petrovic. I believe he re-signed for a couple years. He was in the AHL for a few seasons with Texas. Had 62 points last year, and he's also a righty. So that's never a bad thing. And listening to some of the comments that Pete Deboer made too, he also mentioned there's probably going to be 2 or 3 at least NHL ready type players that are going to be up front, and probably at least a couple more on defense starting the season because of numbers and the cap situation. And of course, they don't have a ton of cap flexibility. And, there's always the maneuvers, and that's just life today in the NHL. You remember that COVID season? It was like you had to send somebody up and down every single day because they had to meet the number, and it was just chaos. But that's just the way life is in today's NHL with the cap situation. So I love to have a guy like Hanley. And I think if you had to play him every day, you're not going to see a ton of issues. And I've said a lot about some of these guys. They're available. They don't get banged up very much. And they make the simple play. Hanley understands his role. He understands his ability. And he usually gets the job done more often than not. And sometimes that's all you can ask for in a guy. And I think Pete Deboer has trust in him, which is probably more important. They have a lot of trust. And he understands the system, obviously. And now we're going to be in year 2 of Pete Deboer. And I don't think that's going to be an issue. So I think a lot of exciting things to come from Joel Hanley, who may be the odd man out. And you got to be excited for a guy like Liam Bichel as well, who was the Stars' first-round pick in 2022, 18th overall, just like Thomas Harley. And he's big, 6'5", and looks to be a little bit more offensively inclined than a guy like Hakanpaa. That's a guy who knows, maybe he'll get some touch. He's only 19. Maybe he has an opportunity to work in and play some NHL games this season. Injuries happen. Like it's next man up mentality. No one's going to feel sorry for you, and you got to be ready with guys. And I think for the first time too in a while, the Stars do feel very comfortable with the depth they have. Is it the defensive core that can really get this done? Because what I'm always thinking of is you got to think of your Vegases. You got to think of the Tampa Bay Lightning teams. Like, that's the type of defensive play you have to have night in and night out to get the job done to reach the ultimate goal. And is this the group to do that? Can they win it? Of course they can. Look, on any given night, this team can win a game, and the whole team, the whole roster as a whole can certainly win. But you got to play to that extra level, right? And they just could not get to that level against a Vegas team that was very deep, and they really struggled to defend with tons of speed, right? Because they were a little bit slower on the back end. Let's be honest. They're a little bit older with your Suters, and, Hakanpaa and Lindell are now into their early 30s. They're not going to get any faster. And those are the teams you're going to have to compete with. The LA Kings of the world and the Edmonton Oilers, the Avalanche, like speed. You got to be able to defend that because that's just the nature of today's game. And those are the type of teams you're going to be seeing deep in the playoffs. And they were a little bit overwhelmed, even against the Kraken. And they squeaked out of that series. And they weren't able to get out of Vegas, of course, as we know. But those are the type of teams I'm thinking about when, hey, you got to compete with these guys if you want to reach your ultimate goal. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Let me know. You think this is a better group than last season, especially with Lundkvist coming in and having maybe finds a little bit more consistency, a little bit bigger. You break up the Hakanpaa Lindell pairing. How's that all going to play out? I think it's a lot of intrigue, and it'll be a fun opening night. And it'll be especially fun to, just get hockey back and rolling. I know everybody's stoked. Big preseason finally yesterday, 7-0 against Arizona. And look, I understand it wasn't your most likely lineup for Arizona because they had the split squad situation going on since they had a group playing in Australia. Pretty wild times they have. They had a bunch of split squad guys, and I thought the same thing. I kept looking at the schedule. I'm like, aren't they playing in Australia? Because they played the first game, I think, of the preseason against LA. Anyways, completely weird and irrelevant point, but yeah, dominating win against Arizona. I don't think anybody thought it was going to be any other way. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode. Let's talk a little bit about the pairings, give our official preview, our official predictions of the pairings, because we kind of already know. Let's be honest, it's not that huge of a prediction, but something I can say I was right on, right? And take a little bit more of a look into the defensive system for Pete Deboer and the Dallas Stars as well. And we'll go ahead and do that in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use, first off, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over and unders, and all that good stuff. I know all you Stars fans, you're probably watching those pesky Dallas Cowboys that just can never seem to get over the hump, okay? I've never seen success for the Dallas Cowboys as well. Look, I was born at the back end of the 90s in 99 when the Stars were beginning their terror on the Western Conference, but we know those Cowboys can never seem to get over the hump. But maybe if you throw some money on them, who knows? Probably not. Look, okay, that's just how the Cowboys go. But go ahead, get that FanDuel app and go ahead and get to betting and get those Cowboys some extra motivation, right? Like if they need any more, give them some extra motivation, sprinkle a little bit of money on them. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Let's wrap things up here on Monday, September 25th. Man, September has flown by, hasn't it, for you guys? I mean, holy cow. It's like we're already here. October's right around the corner. Opening night, October 12th against the St. Louis Blues. Can't wait for that Central Division matchup. And as I mentioned earlier, make sure to stay tuned for tomorrow. Big crossover with Locked On Wild. Seth Topol, excited to have my first crossover, and let's try to maybe dig into the Minnesota Wild failures over the last few years, all the first round exits. Am I right? Let's maybe not. I need to have some friends on the Locked On Podcast Network, but we'll have some fun tomorrow. So make sure to stay tuned for that as well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the pairings, who we're expecting to see here for the Stars, and we'll start right away. Miro Heiskanen and Ryan Suter. They were the leaders on time on ice last season, and from what it looks like, are going to be your power play quarterbacks. Of course, Miro on the top unit. I've said it. I don't want to see Ryan Suter on the second power play unit. I'll be honest. I don't think I have much pull and leverage in order to persuade them not to do that. And supposedly he's been practicing there a bit in training camp. So we may have to hold on for that one, guys. Okay. Maybe we'll have to wait. But let's try Thomas Harley. Why not? I think he would be excellent. An excellent role for it. Look, and then we're most likely going to see Harley and Hakanpaa. I thought you're maybe going to see Harley and Lindell, but it looks like they want to pair Harley and Hakanpaa, which I understand too, because that allows you to have each guy play on the right side, right? With Thomas being lefty and Hakanpaa being the righty, the very elusive righties in this lineup. So I think that's going to be a really fun pairing, and who knows, they may end up really kind of becoming your second pair defensively behind Miro and Suter, because they do look like they're going to have a nice balance of that size. And with Harley and his ability to skate and jump up in the rush, it could be a match made in heaven, which we're all hoping it will be. And then to finish out kind of your six, Nils Lundkvist and Esa Lindell. It'll be kind of interesting to see them. You got the Finn and the Swede. Maybe it's a perfect pairing because Lindell used to play with Klingberg all those years. So a little Scandinavian pairing to lock it up on the back end, and hopefully get Niels to come back, be a little bit more consistent. As you mentioned, he's supposedly bigger, which is going to help with battles and all that sort of thing, right? That comes with being a little bit stronger and a little bit more experience. And then we all know about Lindell, and hopefully he can have a bounce back season. And once again, I've mentioned it 1,000 times, but being away from Hakanpaa, maybe it makes him a little bit more effective now, where he can take control of his defensive zone. You know, he's a stay-at-home defenseman, which he did struggle a bit last season in that. But pairing him with a guy like Niels, who's a little bit more mobile, maybe that helps and allows them to get out of the zone quicker. And you're not playing as much in your defensive zone, because that's the goal at the end of the day. And it looks like your odd man out is probably going to be Joel Hanley. And of course, could be some guys going up and down like the Bayreuth or Petrovic. And even mentioned Liam Bichel, who's young, and certain things like that. But the reason I wanted to talk a bit on the system before we get out of here is because from what it looks like, I think this group and the pairings are going to be a little bit more suitable and tailorable to this system for Pete Deboer, right? Where, the emphasis is on puck possession, right? Having the puck. And he takes big pride on having guys that can win faceoffs, because if you're playing with the puck, you can force the issue. And it's all about getting out of your own zone quickly, getting the puck up in the play to your wingers, and then you can get through neutral ice. That was one of the big changes we saw, especially offensively, where it was a little less dump and chase, right? Carrying onto the puck through the neutral ice, carrying into the offensive zone, because you have so many playmakers and making plays from there. They're one of the best teams off the rush all of last season. And it's kind of the same, name for the Stars defensive groups, where it's, less 50-50 battles, right? Less just horseshoeing it around the end wall, right? Less of the rims and having those battles. If you have possession, then you're able to control and make that play. And that's why I say, or I've kind of mentioned, it's important that you kind of have guys being able to play on the right side, because that'll help with possession, not on your backhand as much. And you have the ability to make a firm, hard pass out to your outlets. And because it does revolve around puck possession. and not allowing the other team to dictate the play, so to speak. And of course, the forwards have a big help with that too, right? And look, you got to limit the odd man rushes, but I understand we're all humans. These are humans that are playing this spectacular game. There's going to be mistakes and there's going to be blown coverages, and that's going to happen. But if they're able to just take a skosh or a bit down of those grade A chances that we saw last year, you're going to do huge for your netminders, especially like Ottinger, because there was times at last season where you're relying too much on him, right? It's great to have that safety valve, right? Where you can just not even play defense sometimes, and you always have that guy like Ottinger in the between the pipes, and he can make that stop for you. But the reason I say it's really important to take the pressure off is because last year, I think it mentally took a toll on Jake Ottinger, right? It was his first full season in the NHL. They had to play him a ton more than they wanted to. Granted, those were circumstances out of their control with Wedgwood being out and Matt Murray just not ready to play at this level. And you had to play him a lot more than you wanted to. And then, of course, you're going to play him every playoff game. And uh, as the season and the series went along and the games did, it looked like it was harder for Otter to make that stop, right? And of course, he delivered sometimes. But the more you can do to limit those great chances and not have Otter have to be sprawling and being almost spectacular every night, which they did better at last year. I will give them that because we got accustomed to that in previous years where the Ben Bishops and the Anton Adobins were, literally had to be lights out to win a hockey game. And you didn't have to be as much lights out because this offense was able to, score in bunches at some points throughout last season. So very, very important that the more pressure they can take off guys like Andre, he's going to be more fresh because I'm always thinking playoff time. Look, I know that's like 8 months away, but I'm always thinking, and that's always the question looming. Are we good enough to get to this level? Are we good enough to make this jump, right? We've seen it. They can get to the Western Conference Finals. It's a different ball game to get to that next level. And because we're playing for Stanley Cups now, right? I know it's kind of a weird mentality shift because we're like, let's just get in, right? We may be a wild card, but we get in. We're going to be tough out, and I think it's a great thing to be in this expectation of we're going to get in and we're going to do some damage, right? Like we expect to win 2 series, and that'll be a thrilling ride to be a part of, and excited for the roller coaster to come. Okay, that's going to wrap up today's Locked On Stars podcast. I know we kind of went everywhere. I feel like I was rambling, but I kind of wanted to wrap up, put a nice little bow on the defensive group, finish up the previews, and we'll kind of start getting into now some of the forwards, and we'll go into some of the highly anticipated seasons for guys like Jason Robertson. Again, can he build off a 109-point season? Rope Hintz, the most underrated player in the NHL. We can say it. And Matt Duchene, of course, who's now entered into the lineup. A lot of guys to get into, and probably the most forward depth the Stars have had in forever as well. Okay, that's going to wrap up today's Locked On Stars podcast. Thank you guys so much for all your love and support. So glad to be a part of this community. Let's have a wonderful, wonderful week. Please go ahead, hit me up on Twitter or X, whatever they're calling that thing, Joey the Jet 19. Got some of my work on there as well. You can take a listen to some of my calls. We had a thrilling OT win wraparound on Saturday night. Pretty crazy game, but we got out of there with the win for the Chippewa Steel. So very, very excited. All right, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you tomorrow. Make sure to check in tomorrow. We got a crossover with Locked On Wild. So that'll do it for today. And for now, so long, Stars fans.